Good afternoon, I'm Ken Burns. People have often asked me why, after more than 40 years of making films strictly about American history, would I executive produce documentaries on subjects like cancer and genetics, and now youth mental health. Why? Many of our films have, in their own way, dealt with mental health issues. Abraham Lincoln was severely depressed. Meriwether Lewis of Lewis and Clark was bipolar. And of course, many tens of thousands of veterans of the Civil War, World War I and II, and Vietnam have suffered from PTSD and other health challenges. Today, our country is experiencing a mental health crisis, so the topic has to be confronted head-on. This collaboration between America's leading brain and mental health advocates, foundations, corporations, and philanthropists, this great production team, and of course PBS, can make a major contribution to raising awareness about this issue, and in the process give hope to countless people who have been reluctant, if not afraid, to ask for help. As a society, we continue to test the resiliency of youth without truly understanding how the stresses of today, including these unprecedented times, are impacting them. We've set out to listen to and to learn from America's young people, documenting their experiences, but also listening to how they are identifying new ways to address mental health challenges. It is a remarkable journey that we hope will capture the unique voices of these young people as they navigate an extraordinarily difficult moment in our country's history. We're very happy to share some early interview footage from this film in production. Thank you so much for your support of this important project.
I think there's so many things you can say about mental illness. It comes out of nowhere, and then it just creeps into your body, and you don't know how to deal with it.
It's a strange thing to look back on and think to myself, I really didn't care about anything at that point. Not caring if I wake up.
It became a very frustrating thing whenever I'd look in the mirror and there's nothing wrong with me on the outside. There's absolutely nothing wrong to make sense of that pain.
That moment that nothing else mattered to me, that I just threw myself in front of a moving car.
I told my parents what would happen if I wasn't here.
I still had a whole future that I had planned, it's like I was planning the suicide, but at the same time, I was making plans to go out to the movies with my friends the next week.
It's hard to endure, but it's just, take it one day at a time. And that's kind of how I've been living my life.
It affects my daily life all day, every day.
When I finally did start to think oh, I'm probably an addict, I was like, no, you're just lying to yourself.
I really want to live, and I'm trying to make the effort, and I want to have a good life. Maybe 1, 2 kids, not the white picket fence, but something that's livable, not this. But I want it. And I just want normal and mundane and average. Maybe a trip to Myrtle Beach every summer. I don't care. I'm sick of crazy, chaotic, up and down mess.
There really is light. There really is. I know you're you don't know me. You have no idea of my journey. You have no idea. You're right, I don't. You're right, I don't. But I do know about lots of other kids' journeys. They are very different than yours, I'm sure of that. But what I know is that you're worth it. You have value. You are fighting this fight that you truly have no idea whether you're going to win or not. You're beyond courageous. You're beyond courageous. And you're stronger than you know. So keep the fight. Stay strong in your resolve, because you're worth it.
Welcome to Wellbeing's Mental Health in the Classroom, hosted by Nebraska Public Media. I'm Sherry Dawson, the Director of the Division of Behavioral Health at the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services. You just saw a trailer for the new Ken Burns documentary, Hiding in Plain Sight, Our Mental Health Crisis. It will premiere in 2022 on PBS. We're doing a series of well-being online discussions to help raise awareness and really share resources around youth mental health in Nebraska. This is an awesome opportunity to just normalize the understanding, the awareness, and the conversation that we need to have in Nebraska. This event in this ongoing series will focus on mental health, but how specifically it impacts teachers and students in the classrooms across Nebraska. Joining me today are Dana Tawahara. She is a licensed school-based mental health practitioner, and she provides individual therapy and does training on mental health education for both teachers and the students. The students are in grades K through 12. She's in the Chadron Public Schools. She's taught anger management and communication, conflict resolution skills in classrooms, among many other topics. And Dana is part of Project Aware, a partnership between the Nebraska Department of Education and Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services and our Division of Behavioral Health. So it's really great to have you. She continues to build and enhance partnerships through Project Aware and her regular work that promote the healthy development of students and also help prevent youth violence. And I'm also happy to have Jamie Mapp. She's a school psychologist and mental health clinician in Nebraska's Educational Service Unit, or ESU, and it's ESU number 5, and that's ESU serves Southeast Nebraska. She partners with the mental health team, school districts, administrators, teachers, staff, students, families, also community members, and she provides a range of services as well as supports that promote mental wellness. And I love that word, mental wellness among all students. So thank you both for joining. And throughout the discussion, we want to hear from you. So please be sure to share any question you have for our panel and do that through the chat. We'll try to answer as many as we can throughout the program. We're also going to be seeing some teachers, counselors, and students who share their very personal experiences and journeys. And just to kick us off, I did want to share that I really appreciate this opportunity. I have a very personal connection to this topic. I was a student in 3rd grade that had a lot of anxiety, and I didn't know it was anxiety at the time. I experienced it in the classroom. I would begin to, feel kind of the walls close in, if you will, and just begin to cry. I had a lot of tummy aches and was going to the school nurse. And I also had a change in that I wasn't as social as I was, but I was very fortunate to have such wonderful school folks and parents, and I received help very young. And so again, this conversation today, I hope will touch and help the viewers and their families and the communities. So before we go into our first video story, I wanted to talk, Dana and Jamie, with both of you for a few minutes about some of the recent initiatives and projects that you have going on in your schools. So Dana, in Chadron, you recently undertook a universal mental health screening for all students. So tell us a little bit more about that. What was the process like, and any takeaways? What did you learn? What did the school learn from that?
Oh my goodness, we learned so much. It is quite an undertaking. It's something that I think a school district has to be extremely prepared for. And they need to put together a large team in order to do what's called a universal mental health screening. We assessed each individual student through this screening process, and older students were allowed to answer for themselves and talk about their own kind of mental health through this screening process. The younger students were evaluated by teachers, mostly on behavioral kind of things. And we just took the time. I think one of the things that, in terms of takeaways that we took away from the universal screening, was that after each screening that we did, we spoke with students individually. So someone from the team had an individual conversation with the student, and whether they were doing great and had no concerns or whether they were struggling, they had the opportunity to learn about resources in case they knew somebody or at some point they weren't doing well. They also had the opportunity to talk about who were the adults in the building who they felt, if they were struggling with, they could go talk to. And then they also just had the opportunity to have time out during the day to talk to a mental health professional, just regarding all sorts of different things. Extremely time consuming, but having the team that was well equipped, put together, we were all on the same page, and then providing those resources was invaluable. We really just learned a lot about how to set up a mental health screening, how to talk to students about it. And we just found that they were most of the older students were extremely excited to have that opportunity, especially coming back from COVID. We had brick and mortar school all year. So, the stress levels were high, and they really needed that opportunity to check in with an adult about nothing other than their mental health.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really neat. And I'm an RN, so nursing in my background, and I think about how many things and ways in which we screen for physical health, including in schools, right? And so the opportunity to really get that whole body connection and begin to think about those mental health screenings, I think that's an amazing opportunity for us. As you say, just opening up that conversation. I know I experienced that even at my age, that sometimes there's just that invitation and you can connect. So very, very neat. Jamie, I know you have similar processes and different things, perhaps maybe in a different way, but similar. So tell us about how things went and how you found that to be beneficial.
So in our ESU 5 region, and we consult across the state, we really use a wellness for all approach, which we've been developing and working on for the past few years. And so we really just continued to lean into that this year. We obviously anchor in student mental wellness. So just that ability for kids and youth to realize their potential, cope with life stressors, which we all know, just navigated that collective trauma together, be able to work productively and then contribute positively to our school communities, both inside the doors of our schools and outside of our doors. And so with that Wellness for All, we learned really early on, and it was amplified this year, it's not just about the students' wellness, it's also about staff and educator wellness. And so those, when we say educators, are really meaning all the grownups in the building, right? So the cooks up to the superintendent and everybody in between, really focusing on mental wellness, because we need staff to be sound and well in order for them to create safe spaces for our youth to show up in and be seen and be heard. And so that Wellness for All, we talk about, we do culture and climate of buildings. We're constantly talking about destigmatizing mental health. We show up in our buildings, they call us by name, and we're just providing a range of services and supports to promote that mental wellness literally for all. And it was more important than ever. And we also use some suicide prevention and awareness through QPR, a wide variety of anchors, but we're looking at collective efficacy, and we are really focusing on, in order for kids to be able to build their mental wellness, all the grownups need to have strong wellness as well. And so what are those strategies, and how do we help them show up and feel safe in the spaces that we're creating?
Sure. No, I think I love the term wellness. And when we can talk about mental health and how do we promote mental health, but wellness is a great focus. And from wellness, we get into a sense of well-being, and we need that for both adults and children. I think the work that you all are doing is amazing, and look forward to hearing more. Right now, we're going to be going to our first video story. Counselor Eric Depew, who's from Millard, talks about why it's really important for schools to provide mental health services and supports.
My name is Eric Depew, and I'm a school social worker for Millard Public Schools, and I'm a licensed therapist and clinical social worker, and I also do clinical practice outside of school as well. My position is such that I have both counseling and social work duties, which I love. I work with systems and people outside of the school, whether it's child protection or different service agencies. My job, really, the way I describe it is, how can I help the kids that I work with at school get the best education possible and remove a lot of those barriers that might be in the way to them getting that education. You know, specifically Millard is, I think, the second or third largest school district in the state. I think we have something like 25,000 kids. In my specific school, like I said, our enrollment is 850 kids. We have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, so you're thinking anywhere from like 11 to 14-year-olds. Our school has kids from all different walks of life and all different skin colors and creeds and religions, and it's important that we're aware of those things and respectful, and we can have those really good conversations together and work through some of those issues. As a public school system, we guarantee the right that every kid is going to get a great education, first and foremost, okay? Well, unfortunately, not every kid has the same access, ability, resources. Not every kid starts at the same playing field. If we want kids to be successful, if we want them to go to class and sit down and sit the whole period and listen, we have to understand that there's a lot of kids who bring mental illness to our classrooms. 30 kids, and there's one kid who maybe is depressed and sleeping. There's one kid who has a behavior issue and can't sit still. There's one kid who has ADHD and forgot his meds that morning. I mean, these are problems in every single classroom, all those kids. And I don't care if it's the kid who's got 105% on every single test they have, and they have 2 loving parents at home who provide them everything, or that kid who lives in foster care and, you know, parents were murdered as a child and, you know, were sexually abused at the age of 13, they're sitting in your class. I mean, it's not a level playing field. So what we try to do is give everyone a fair and equal shot at that. And we do that by providing resources. If you have a kid coming in your class who every day wears a smile and is awake and is clean and has good hygiene and comes in, has fallen asleep, hasn't showered in days, is wearing the same clothes, teachers notice that. Why should we help with mental health with kids? Well, they're kids, first of all. They're people. Why would we not help someone if we have the resources and ability to do that? And I'd argue that with anybody until the end of time. And does it cost money? Yes, it costs money. It's not cheap to educate our kids. It's not cheap to make sure our kids are safe. But our kids are our future, and our kids they deserve to be helped.
Eric's experiences were powerful, and a reminder for us all that schools really could be a great equalizer, where we can really provide help and services to students who are in school for a big part of the day and who may not know about resources or have resources perhaps outside of school. So this also leads us into questions. So thank you for keeping questions in the chat box. So I would just like to say that when a parent and a student, they have varying needs, and trying to really understand how it is that schools and maybe community partners or Dana and Jamie, how you determine within a school the levels of resource. What will the school participate? How about those connections to community resources? What does that process look like in your schools?
I can speak to our school. First of all, I'd like to say, like, the parent always has the choice, and the parent always is in control of kind of what happens with their child in terms of their mental health services. Many parents find multiple barriers to accessing services, whether it's transportation or scheduling. And so having a mental health provider and mental health services in the school eliminates some of those barriers and provides some opportunities. I think that it's important to note that the schools know that they are not mental health experts, and that's why they partner with the ESU 13s who do have professionals that know mental health services and know how to treat and know what the best options are. Schools partner with these mental health professionals and hopefully learn and are educated about trauma and how to respond more effectively to students. But I think the parents always are in the driver's seat and are always making the decisions about their health, just like they would with medical, physical health. It's the same thing with mental health. So we're just there to provide access to resources, maybe provide additional resources the families don't know about, and to help them get connected, as well as sometimes provide the services here at school.
Jamie, from your perspective in talking about different levels of need, and the video that we just watched also reminded me that not every child's behavior is indicative of a mental illness. For example, a student could be experiencing a loss of a loved one, a family member, moving from a different community. Their parents may be experiencing a divorce, and they still may be challenged and not be maybe the same in terms of their student behavior, and yet it doesn't rise to the level perhaps of mental illness. And so tell us a little bit more about the connection and what you're watching for.
Well, I think it starts with that destigmatizing piece, right? So making sure that all of our educators, including families and communities, and our youth understand that everybody has mental health. So people are going to have bad days and people are going to have good days. And we're all kind of navigating this continuum, right, of mental wellness to mental illness. And depending on the situation, like you just said, a divorce, loss, just isolation over the last year, depending on the situation, and then what coping skills and healing skills they have access to, we are constantly moving up and down that continuum. And so I think schools, more than ever, these needs have always been there, right? This year, they've just kind of been amplified to a degree where we can no longer really say that's not really our role, but we are forced to acknowledge that the whole child is both their physical health and their mental health. And in order to educate and for kids to learn, those things have to be intact. And so I think schools are always a hub and they're always willing to navigate in some degree and understanding their scope of practice, like you guys had said, and when to invite various helpers in. Sometimes you have these teachers that are huge on connection and they are just like innate, and all it takes is them doing a check-in with that student every single day for a couple weeks to get them on track. And sometimes we are needing to collaborate and partner with higher levels of care and determining ongoing wellness plans for students. And so really it's meeting the kids where they're at, it's meeting families where they're at, it's listening, it is providing student voice and choice, and it's really reflecting and then meeting them where they're at, and we're taking a step at a time. And sometimes we're taking some steps backwards, but it's that trusting and safe space where families, educators, and youth are able to sit in and figure out, how do we provide them hope? How do we help them see the light? And depending on the day, I mean, their needs change. So it's also just mental health providers being present. It's also teaching educators and superintendents and cooks and everybody what are cues you look for, but also how are you active in your supervision throughout your day. So there's a wide continuum of supports, and I think it's just taking it a kid at a time, or when we know we're in a collective trauma, what you might have only done for a few kids, you're now doing for the whole school. Like we saw educators rise to the occasion of mental health check-ins with all students every single day, sometimes paired with their temperature check, but it's being flexible and the art of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really good discussion. And I think, again, from a physical and mental health, that continuum and to think about that and how it is that we continue to stay checked in and checking with each other. And again, having the opportunity to be connected when it seems to be a worry or a concern. And everybody's really all for the same goal to make that student successful, whether it's physical or mental health. So I really have the opportunity to discuss some other resources as we move along here. So I wanted to just encourage people to continue to ask questions, and we're happy to hear from you, and we will include both resources and questions as we move along here. So soon we're going to be hearing from Jada, who is a student with the National Brave Teens Project, who shares some of the reasons why she was reluctant to talk about her mental health and how she's found different ways to express herself. And I think one of the things in physical health care, I always tell people that when you have a physical illness, you don't pretend to not have it. But when we have experienced mental illness or substance use, we still have that hiding. And so this will be great to hear from Jada and what we can learn from her experiences.
Hi everyone, it's Jada, and today I'm going to talk about ways that I've been affected by mental health stigma and how I've overcome that. I used to be afraid of asking for help a lot because I had a fear of being annoying or repetitive to other people. I also have experienced just making myself even more overwhelmed than I already am because of the bottling up of emotions, which connects to keeping it inside and not letting it out. Finding different ways to express myself has been the best way that I kind of show other people who I really am, how I'm not my mental illness, and feeling more free because I'm not hiding anymore. I'm not hiding my emotions. Writing music and writing in general have really helped me a lot. I've been journaling for several years now, and I continually do that through my posts and through my stories, as well as through my original music. I write about my experiences. I told people how I suffer from depression and anxiety. So I kind of take people on my full journey, and that is one of the biggest steps to healing, is kind of accepting, you know, this is how I feel right now, but it'll pass, and I'm allowed to share with other people and feel like I'm not going to be judged because other people will listen. And that is our goal when we want to end the stigma. Find what works for you and how you can be more open to helping yourself and to helping others.
Wow, that was a really powerful message and an opportunity and probably a lesson for all of us. It is and can be difficult to talk about mental health. And part of that is the stigma, and part of that is it really hasn't become what a chaplain once referred to it as a casserole disease. So if you had a student that maybe had some kind of surgery, or maybe even experiencing cancer and going through treatments and so forth, usually there's a lot of rallying behind the individual and support. And you just talk about it and ask how things are doing and how you can help. And when it comes to maybe a young person that had a hospitalization or in treatment for drug use, it isn't as natural for folks to just have the same conversation as if you were having, how could you help the individual? What would be helpful to them as they make that transition? So there's still stigma, and there's opportunities for our viewers and for everybody in Nebraska to just normalize that conversation. So Jamie, what are some of the best ways that you think, if you're going to be working with a student and trying to help them ask for help because maybe they're unwilling or you just see them struggling, something's going on. What are some of those strategies?
Well, first of all, you're going to make sure that you're connecting with that student. I think it's kind of twofold, right? You're working with the student, but we're also ultimately working with the environment in which our students are in. So it's always going back to those educators and those grownups, because if they're not going to feel safe, we're not going to force them to have that conversation. And so I think it comes back to the best way we can learn about youth is to learn from youth. So it's making sure that we have that student voice and choice. It's teaching adults when they're connecting with them through connection in the hallway. We're teaching them to move beyond the, hey, how are you? Because we're going to get just as generic of an answer as that question is. It's training them to say, what are you proud of today? What's a goal you have for this week? It's allowing educators to pause their curriculum to have some authentic conversations and to check in. But with youth, it's hopefully they can identify one adult in the school. I mean, that's always the goal, right? Youth need one person that they know is going to show up for them every day in order for them to feel safe. But it's coaching and it's modeling and it's hopefully having them be in an environment that is welcoming and that understands mental health. And it's doing things like that are student led. In one of our school districts that Jen McNally, our director, works in, they had a student voice and choice, like tips and tricks for mental wellness posted all over the building, totally student led, right? So it's making it normal and it's making it safe by doing some very, very basic things while we're meeting kids where they're at. So those would be some of the things that come right to mind. Invite them, invite youth to have conversations with you as educators and as parents. Continue to invite them even when they're not talking and allow them space and allow them some leadership in this initiative and understanding that everyone has mental health.
You bet. I think those are great strategies. When we think about the need and the necessity of really having the students and their families working together as they're navigating perhaps some challenges. So I'm wondering, Dana, as you think about the student and then maybe we're a family in terms of their willingness or just feeling safe, their openness to asking for help and making that connection, and maybe not everybody's at the same place, in the journey. And so how do teachers and counselors not only do some of the things that Jamie was talking about with the students, but also then working with parents and guardians and perhaps other supports to, again, get over that stigma and begin to develop that trust and feel safe?
So our school has done some different things. In addition to getting the adults trained, like we spoke about before, we've started youth mental health first aid. And so our adults are getting trained on how to do that first response kind of things when a mental health challenge arises. And we talk about the difference between mental health challenges and mental health crises throughout that training. So, they feel more equipped to be able to have those questions. And then not only have we invited, teachers to participate in that and school staff, we invite community members to help reduce the stigma. I mean, that's a huge part of what that training is. In addition to being able to talk to a student, you also have to kind of acknowledge your own biases and your own kind of, oh man, I need to word that a little bit differently. All that goes into that training. And so by offering that to our public library, youth staff, and our college here in Chadron, people are getting trained and getting to talk about it more. And the more you talk about it, I think the easier it becomes. So our community is doing that. We also have our Hope Squad here at the school. So in addition to adults being able to talk about it more, now we have youth that are being able to talk about it and being kind of representatives of how to talk about mental health and how to talk about suicide with their peers, and then get those peers connected to the adults in the buildings who can help them with those challenges. So we've kind of, done that 2-layer where we've really engaged students in leadership kind of groups like Hope Squad, and then also the adults.
Yeah, that's excellent. And the mental health first aid training and the
QPR.
Question, Persuade, Refer, which is the QPR. Again, I'm going to use my nurse bias. I talk about how there is a lot of people, if you ask them, and probably students, if you ask them what maybe signs of a stroke were or signs of a heart attack, most people, that's out there. And CPR is an opportunity for many of us. And so just again, to kind of help with that openness to talk, if we begin to think about if you work somewhere or in your school, first aid is required, then mental health first aid addresses the whole person. If you have CPR so that a person to save a life, when you have students and adults that may be experiencing suicidal thoughts, knowing what to do, just like you do in CPR with Question, Persuade, Refer, can save lives. And I think that approach is amazing and very helpful. I'm curious if either one of you in your schools, Dana, you talked about engaging the community. Are there classes for the mental health first aid? There's open, it sounds like, invitations, but are there those kinds of things held at school that the community comes into so that there is that great partnership?
For our school, yes, we have done some at the high school where the community members have attended in person. And then, of course, with COVID, we were able to do some online trainings. And the summer, we've been doing a lot of online trainings and having members of our local Job Corps attend and other places as well.
Jamie, anything specific?
We use the Question, Persuade, Refer model, both with all the educators, and then we also do it with youth every year for every school district. So just providing that common language, because we know that common language can save a life, and it can also just be when people are off, you learn, you ask the question, right? It teaches educators when things feel off, you pause and you talk about it. We address the elephants in the room. And so it provides that common language. We also know that alone is not going to save it. It is helpful, but we also need to be doing all of these other things with wellness and just destigmatizing mental health and providing resources in addition to that QPR piece. But we have seen a significant and steady decrease in our suicide assessments as we have implemented the Wellness for All with kind of all of those prongs, and QPR being one of those. So we believe in it for sure.
You bet. Well, and I think all of in healthcare, that transition from waiting till illness and getting out in front as we promote and identify early, how we can get connected or the calls for help. So the prevention, I love the continuum that you both have. So we're going to watch a video now, and it actually, Dana, will look really familiar to you, and I'm anxious to hear more. This is about teachers from Chadron, and they started a book club to help educate themselves on mental health and trauma-informed classrooms, and really how it impacted and changed their teaching. So really look forward to learning this.
I've been teaching for almost 20 years now. And I think at first, when I first started teaching, there wasn't nearly as much many mental health issues as we see today. So initially when we started the book club, it was focused on teachers and like how we're instructing and technology and stuff like that.
But then we really were like, and Jill especially, she goes, I think we need to start digging into some of the deeper topics. Like what are we as educators seeing? What are our kids going through? What are the struggles they're facing?
She's seen mental health and trauma issues, you know, in kindergarten, first and second grade, and I'm seeing it at my level at the high school. But we weren't really sure, what do we do like in the classroom to make this better? So we began this summer by saying, let's read this book recommended by our mental health professional in our district, Dana Tewahade, to read The Deepest Well by Nadine Burks Harris. And it showed us so much of the science behind trauma.
Jill Paopao actually invited community mental health providers to try to provide another perspective, and those people even suggested another book, and so book club even continued further past what it was going to, beyond just the science behind it, but then also kind of how this could inform classrooms in today's day and age.
Now you know these students are in your room with trauma. How can you better teach and service them?
Some of the factors that they tell you to focus on, you know, come down to empathy and relationship building and things that I've always tried to do, but I think it definitely made me more aware of maybe the struggles that people have had.
I had one little boy. He had 2 twin siblings who were just newborn babies. He knew exactly the amount of formula that he needed to add to their bottle and the water. He knew exactly how to make a bottle. You know, my mom and dad just can't wake up in the middle of the night, so I just make the babies a bottle and I put it in their crib, and that's not something a second grader should know how to do. Maybe, but it's not something they should be expected to do. He's dealing with the trauma of having to be the parent in the house. When things would get hard in the classroom, he would just shut down. He just had a lot going on, and sometimes mastering your addition facts, it's not his concern at that time.
The behavior that you're seeing is not necessarily directed at you. The biggest awareness for me is that kind of constant reminder that I need to empathize and understand through someone else's eyes how they might view the situation.
Not every kid has a stable home life, and I think that's important that they see there's care here in this building. When you come to Chadron High School, you're going to find teachers who care, and they're going to help you through whatever it is you're dealing with. And I think that that's what pushes me. It's just a little bit in my nature to be a helper, to be a fixer, to make it better too, for people. And if that's educating myself so that I can teach others, so I can do a better job in the classroom, that's what I'm gonna do.
At the end of the day, all we want is what's best for our kids. I mean, that's why we're teachers.
We can't teach the same way we always have. Kids with trauma, you cannot approach them in the same manner that you do a kid without trauma. It's not going to be successful. You're going to have that constant battle. And as the adults in the classroom, we have to be the ones to make the change, to bridge those gaps, to make those relationships good and healthy and strong. And then they're able to learn. And that's really what our job is.
That was really powerful and a great example of really how schools and communities and educators all can work together to identify ways to continue mental health initiatives and improving the health of the students and the community. I'm going to add an audience question that came into us, and the question is about whether educators are trained in trauma-informed care, which was referenced in the video. So Dana, any experiences you can share with us on how trauma-informed care and practices have been experienced with the educators that you work for, and maybe even as it relates to the book club that we just heard about?
Yeah, most definitely. So, as part of the AWARE grant, we've really been focusing on what trauma is, what it looks like. We've focused on how we address students who have identified themselves as experiencing trauma. And one of the ways that we've done that is through some specific trainings that have been provided by the AWARE grant or funded through this AWARE grant, which we're just so lucky to have. Teachers are kind of like really understanding, though, that not only does approaching a student who, I guess everybody can learn something from this trauma-informed training, and all students benefit from the training that the teachers and the staff are getting out of this, because it is effective for everyone. And I think that has been super exciting for our schools to understand, like, oh, there's this approach will work not only with a student who's experienced trauma, but a student who hasn't. So we've provided some specific trainings to our staff, as well as people doing things on their own, like the book club. And then, as part of the AWARE grant, I provide some training and I provide some very specific pieces of information or ways that they can interact with students in the classroom, whether that's the teachers or even the administrators, like getting them to understand, like, you don't want to walk up and touch somebody necessarily all the time, really basic things like that, because their reaction may be something from trauma. So being able to do those kind of things, we've just started that process, and we're actually looking forward to some more trainings this next school year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's again, just an awesome example. And you mentioned how people support each other. And so I want to bring up another question that we received. And peer support is so important for students and effective. And the question is, how can we get peer support for students with disabilities who experience anxiety, depression, and maybe some similar kinds of things? So Jamie, have you had any experience with this, and what are your strategies in regards to peer support?
Yes, we know peers are amazing and usually up to any task, right? They want to be helpful, they want to be inclusive, they really value the environment of school. And so I think obviously having peer models, we don't want to put pressure on peers to a degree that they're uncomfortable with, but absolutely we have seen a lot of things where we are modeling and creating or kind of simulating connection peer to peer. The 2x10 strategy that is very well known in research, which is that 2 minutes a day for 10 days in a row. It's focused typically on adults and students, but we have seen in our ESU 5 region educators utilizing that strategy peer to peer in their classroom. So you're building those connections and that culture and that climate within classrooms, and you're utilizing peer to peer best practices, and how are you building relationships in the classroom. So that would just be one example. Sometimes we've utilized maybe peers that don't love coming into the school building, but they or a student that really doesn't love coming to the school building, or we know Mondays are hard, or whatever the case may be, and we make sure that another visible peer that is identified as want to be helpful meets that student kind of in the hallway nonchalantly. So you can do stuff kind of behind the scenes with peers that kind of have high status and are willing and ready to help. And then you can do stuff deliberately in your classroom to create those connections between peers. And it's pausing, taking a minute out of curriculum, because we know that without wellness, there is no learning. And part of wellness is having positive peer-to-peer relationships. And so it's cultivating that within the classroom, kind of continuously and transparently in everything that they do.
Sure. So again, I love the opportunity for us to think about the impact the book club had in Chadron, and Jamie, some of the activities and work that you're doing as well. Can you both talk a little bit about how some of the initiatives, maybe intentionally or perhaps as a result of actually help teachers just in terms of their own mental health, their own wellness. I haven't flown for a while, obviously with COVID, but one of the things we talk about when the oxygen mask, right, drops, if you're traveling with other people, you need to put it on yourself so that you can take care of other people, but still you have to take care of yourself in order to be effective. So I'm just wondering about some of those initiatives and strategies you have on teacher wellness as a result of either the book club or Jamie, some of your activities as well.
Yeah.
Jamie?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Jamie, go ahead.
Are you sure? So Jen McNally, who's the director of mental health at ESU 5, does a lot of self-care and has kind of kicked that off and wellness for educators along with some collective efficacy. She does a whole lot, but we explicitly teach staff some strategies, right? And they're simple and they're not, I mean, people are like breathing, right? Sure, I'm going to breathe, but it's like, no, do it and then talk to us about it. And we also talk just how you wake up in the morning. What is something you can do for 30 seconds a day during your plan time? How do you get outside? I say mask breaks. I really hope they don't go away, right? We learned the power of stepping outside for 5 minutes. Please make sure you do that. And when you cultivate mental wellness in your classroom and you do some strategies in a classroom, 3 things you're proud of. Go and tell somebody you're happy to see them today. What's one goal or focus for the week? Here's our positive affirmation that we're going to say today. When you do that with your students, it's a win-win because you're creating that time for yourself also as an educator, just built in. So you learn to pause with your students and do those things as well. But it's thinking about staff meetings. How are we starting staff meetings? Are we circling up or is everybody sitting on their phone? Do we start talking about celebrations? And I'm going to tell you, most of the times people want to celebrate youth or they want to celebrate a colleague. They don't want to celebrate themselves. And so it's like these tiny things that have huge impact of, no, you're actually going to celebrate something out loud about yourself because you matter and you deserve to take up some space for 30 seconds, right? And so it's like sprinkling constant and tiny things that don't take huge parts of your day. And it's getting staff and educators to figure out what feels right for them out of all of these strategies. And like we said, how do you start your mornings? How do you get ready for the day? Jen says you say good morning to yourself first. That's one of her things. And everyone's like, yeah, right. Well, we had a staff member that literally stopped us and was like, I can't tell you the power of saying good morning. Like she was like teary. And then we all were like, I mean, it was a little, I'm not teary usually ever. So it was a little dramatic, but it was like literally that tiny thing made this woman feel so much better. So.
That's great. That's great. So we're going to watch 2 videos now, and they share counselor and student experiences about mental health.
Hello, I'm Corey Farley. I'm a freshman counselor at Grand Island Senior High. My daily norm is helping students with either academic concerns, social emotional needs. The year starts with a lot of the just transition things from middle school to high school. This time of the year, I see a lot of separation anxiety and anticipation of the end of the year for our students that home is not a good place. For some of the students, that would come out in anger. For some students, it would show as sadness. So just uncertainty came in many different forms for students. We are about 60% Hispanic in my district, so it's been very interesting with our diversity. We are very diverse. Lots of Somalian, lots of Cuban. We also just have a lot of mobility. We still, at this time of the year, are getting a lot of new students. Just transitioning to our country is so shocking for kids. We know all of the terrible situations that they go through to cross the border. So when they get here, they still don't trust people. They are still fearing what will happen to them. And so it takes a long time to build that trust. We know that students that have relationships with staff are going to be much more successful. So one strategy that I can think of right now, it's called a 2x10, and that's choosing a student that you either just aren't clicking with, or maybe they're tardy every day, maybe they have some substance abuse issues, and you, for 2 minutes, for 10 days in a row, you talk to them about something not related to school. It's just really important that they find someone to talk to. Once you do build that trust though, those newcomers are some of the best students that I have ever worked with. They are so thankful for anything you do. It's just amazing to see.
I have been dealing with mental illness for a little while now. It kind of started with anxiety. I remember being in middle school and dealing with anxiety. And from there, I think it kind of gradually got a little bit worse. I started dealing with depression. And from there, it started getting a little bit worse, and just had thoughts of suicide, Being a person of color, I'm Hispanic. My parents are from Mexico. It's always kind of scary dealing with anxiety and depression. In a Hispanic household, they don't really know how to deal with stuff like that, because I guess they never dealt with stuff like that, with anxiety and depression, and so it's always kind of kind of scary talking with my parents about it. I don't want to say they downplay it, but they don't fully understand it, I guess. My support system has been a couple of people, one of them being Mahatma Larispada. He works at the Latino Center of the Midlands. He's a student advocate at Bellevue West. He also is one of the lead facilitators with one of the groups, Olean. It's a youth group. We kind of talk about stuff like that, like anxiety, mental health illness, knowing your identity, confidence, being confident of who you are. It's kind of nice opening up to someone that that has also experience with stuff like that. I think it's more comfortable talking to someone that that has dealt with anxiety or depression. I like listening to music. It helps me take things off my mind, and just being able to just be alone by myself, listening to music and just relaxing and taking my mind off things. We're all human. We all experience anger. We all experience frustration. We all experience anxiety, whether you're Hispanic or African American or wherever you come from. I think being able to open up to your family about it, not hiding those things, and just telling them how you feel, And I think it's something that we should continue talking about is mental health, especially in the Latino community.
Those videos are really a great celebration of the immense diversity that we experience in Nebraska, and as well as schools, folks from different races, ethnicities, cultures, and languages. There was an example of a school where there were 20 different languages spoken, and individuals from 30 different countries. So lots of opportunity to really help all the students. Jamie, in terms of teachers and schools and just a range, and Dana, let me go to you, because I didn't get to finish last time on the range of backgrounds and cultures. What advice do you have to help access to a wide variety of mental health services for the varying and the diversity that we experience in Nebraska?
So that's definitely a challenge that we face in our frontier area of Nebraska. So we do our best to make sure that we know about resources that are culturally appropriate, that we can provide ourselves, but also that others can provide in our area. We're really close to the Pine Ridge Reservation, and so we have many students who need specialized services or require or want specialized services. So it's important for us to be culturally sensitive, not only as mental health providers, but also make sure that our staff is culturally sensitive and understanding in the schools. And then just access to resources. It's, changing all the time. So it really keeps us on our toes. And we definitely are constantly looking for resources that match people. Also, even though we're in the frontier area, we have other populations like the LGBTQ plus population, who again requires us to be continually educated, updated on resources as well as our own practices. So we're doing that all the time.
Mm-hmm. So we don't have much time left, but I do want to see if we can, Jamie, maybe fairly quickly answer an audience question about some of the largest barriers for mental health issues in youth. Dina certainly talked about a few, but thoughts on barriers?
I think outside of school settings, I think it's access and stigma and a wide variety of variables, which we've talked about before. Inside school walls, I think mental health services are pretty prevalent. Trauma is not new. But we are continuing to learn the impact that trauma has in our classroom. And so barriers inside school walls, we are breaking down through access and destigmatizing mental health and making sure that we are talking to our youth, that we are having conversations, that we are inviting them into spaces, that we are listening. And I wanted to reflect super quickly. I just listened to a youth panel at a conference last week of students of color. And they were like, it was just incredible, every single thing that they were saying. But one of the biggest takeaways that I had that they kept saying is, you need to reflect, not relate. And so part of the education piece that Dana was talking about and being culturally sensitive was representation matters, and making sure that we are constantly reflecting in our practices, which is a barrier, right? We don't know, or the perception of various cultures, we need to seek out experts in that, within that culture, or ask those students, what would your parents think? What is the best way for us to go about this? How do we meet them where they're at? And piece by piece, step by step, help kids get the help that they need. So,
yeah. So the time has gone fast, and I can tell that we all could continue the conversation, but want to thank everybody for joining us, and both of you for sharing your thoughts and experiences. Dina, you are a licensed school-based mental health practitioner from Chadron. Thank you. Jamie Mapp, as the school psychologist and mental health clinician in ESU 5. And again, I'm Sherry Dawson, Director of the Division of Behavioral Health at the Department of Health and Human Services. A reminder to the audience, you can watch the past events in this series and look at the mental health resource guide online, and www.nebraskapublicmedia.org/wellbeings. And thank you so much for joining today and sharing with all of your great questions, and just continue to normalize that conversation about mental health.